The true crime reporter never settles for standing outside the yellow crime scene tape. You knock on doors, dig through records, and cultivate sources to get to the bottom of the story. I'm Robert Riggs, the host and creator of the True Crime Reporter podcast, back with another story from 3 decades of investigative reporting. In this episode, I pulled out my reporter's notebooks. My law enforcement sources opened up their confidential case files. We sat down together to talk. And you can listen in to our journey into darkness. But before you do, be advised that this podcast is for a mature audience and not for the faint of heart. Some episodes may contain profanity and graphic details of violent crimes. To follow True Crime Reporter, text True Crime to 33777. Text True Crime, that's 2 words, True Crime, to 33777. With that said, here we go on another journey into darkness. The confession by Kenneth McDuff's accomplice in the kidnapping of Colleen Reed from an Austin car wash jump-started the manhunt for the serial killer. Armed with an arrest warrant for murder, the fugitive hunters launched a nationwide dragnet. The U.S. Marshal Service publicized their nationwide dragnet for Kenneth McDuff on the America's Most Wanted television program. An employee at a waste disposal company in Kansas City immediately recognized McDuff's mugshot and called the police. McDuff had already been busted there in a prostitution sting using the alias Richard Fowler from a stolen ID. Parnell McNamara says McDuff worked on a garbage truck by day and hid out in a homeless shelter by night.
He had been living somewhere up there, I think a homeless shelter. He was on a trash truck. How appropriate is that? You know, a piece of human garbage riding on a trash truck. He was worse than any piece of trash that they had in the back. Excuse my language, but this guy's just so despicable. And so, anyway, the Kansas City police and the marshals set up on the trash truck, and as he made his rounds, they arrested him, at that point.
McNamara and other lawmen boarded a U.S. Marshal Service jet to Kansas City to bring McDuff back to Waco, Texas, to stand trial for capital murder.
We took a plane load of us with one empty seat for McDuff on the way back and flew into Kansas City that night. We ended up getting to the jail, the county jail, that night about midnight. And so we got McDuff out of the cell and started interrogating him there in the county jail. We just started talking to him, asking him where he'd been, what he was doing. At that time, he thought all we were up there for was him violating his parole. So he was acting cocky. He was telling us how he had stabbed people in prison and got in a knife fight with a guy, and he was showing us the guy was holding his knife this way, and I was holding mine that way, and I had more reach on him, and I cut the SOB to shreds. He was bragging about all this stuff that he'd done. And so we were just talking to him, and then we asked him where he was Christmas. Because we knew that he had been in Austin on Christmas Day, 1991, looking for kids to kidnap with another thug that had already given us statements that he wanted to kidnap 2 little girls that were on roller skates Christmas Day that were skating down the sidewalk on South Congress. So this guy wouldn't let him do that, even though he was a thug and a fighter. He wasn't a kid killer. Then McDuff goes to a Dairy Queen, and there's 2 girls on a phone booth outside, and McDuff tells his partner, we're going to get these 2 kids and go. And that guy would not let him, hit him in the arm, said, "McDuff, take off. We're not getting any kids." And so he said McDuff backed up very slowly and watched those kids as far as he could see them down the street. And then 4 days later, on the 29th of December, is when he kidnapped Colleen Reed. So we asked him where he was on Christmas Day. And he said, "I don't remember." And we said, "Come on, McDuff. Everybody remembers where you were Christmas Day, you know?"
Yeah.
And he said, "Not me," with a big old smile. And we said, "Well, let me refresh your memory. How about in Austin, driving around in your tan Thunderbird with so-and-so and looking for little girls to kidnap?" And at that time, he backed up. And this is after maybe 45-minute interrogation, maybe an hour, and we started hitting him with this, "Where were you on Christmas Day?" And so then he lawyered up, and that would have been about 2 o'clock in the morning. And so we had to terminate the interrogation.
On the flight back to Waco, the unemotional McDuff gazed out the window as if nothing was wrong. The lawmen stared at McDuff. They dwelled on the horrific torture suffered by Colleen Reed. Parnell McNamara says for a split second, he thought about pushing McDuff out of the emergency exit.
He was acting like nothing bothered him at all. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of sitting there by him, and I looked at the emergency hatch, and I thought, what if I or somebody else turned the latch and kicked him out and let him fall 35,000 feet? It takes 5 to 6 minutes to hit the ground, and let him think about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, would I have done it? No. But did I think about it? Absolutely.
The Marshal Service jet taxied to a stop at the Waco Regional Airport. The cabin door opened and stairs folded out. McDuff stepped out wearing a white T-shirt, green Army fatigue pants with his wrist handcuffed at the front of his waist. An angry crowd pressed against a chain-link fence by the tarmac. They cried out for some old-style hanging tree justice. Deputy U.S. Marshal Mike McNamara and Inspector U.S. Marshal Dan Carnevale flanked McDuff and held him with a firm grip on each bicep. McDuff, slightly balding and thinner, with his hair slicked back, towered 6 inches above them with a menacing expression. I shoved out my microphone and asked McDuff if he had killed anyone. He glanced into the TV camera and said no.
"Did you kill anyone, Mr. McDuff?"
Parnell McNamara walked behind McDuff.
I remember you being there.
Yeah, and he just shrugs it off like nothing.
No,
just nothing.
Yeah, it didn't mean any more to him than going to the store buying an ice cream.
The marshals put McDuff into the back seat of a sheriff's cruiser. Parnell McNamara climbed in to sit beside McDuff. When McNamara saw the size of the angry crowd that greeted McDuff, he became worried.
We had gotten word that morning that there had been threats that had gone into America's Most Wanted, that they were going to kill him before he got to the federal courthouse. So we were on edge. I'll take a bullet for a lot of people, family and good friends, but never a scumbag like this. So we were afraid that we were going to get shot on the way to the courthouse because of these threats, because so many people wanted to kill this guy. And so we had to run almost all the red lights. And we had the sheriffs in front of us, maybe a police unit, but there was probably 10 or 15 police cars in that caravan going to the federal courthouse. So once we got there, that's where the huge crowd was. And it could have been 100, 150 people or more, and they were screaming and cursing this guy. And it was unbelievable. And now, this guy that we have been chasing and trying to catch all this time, now we had to protect this lowlife SOB from the crowd and get him into the courthouse and get him magistrated.
More than 200 people waited for McDuff's arrival on the lawn of the federal courthouse in downtown Waco. As the motorcade sirens drew closer and closer, the crowd turned into an angry mob. Melissa Northrup's sister-in-laws shook their clenched fist at McDuff and screamed to the top of their lungs.
"Vengeance is mine! Thank the Lord! He's gonna get you!"
Bill Johnston also arrived at the federal courthouse in McDuff's motorcade. Johnston says the community's anger about the parole of the deranged sexual killer just boiled over.
Cursing and screaming, and then over the top of that, at one point, horrible, gosh, it's terrible. I think a sister of one of his victims began screaming at him, and it was so personal. It was unbelievable, but it was a horrible. It was a shocking scene because we'd been out of town and didn't know what all had happened, and then when we got back, there was this big crowd. But it was really something. It was a little bit dangerous, not in a way for us, but I think someone would have probably stolen him and killed him had they been able to.
I felt the crowd lunge forward. They wanted to tear Kenneth McDuff limb from limb.
He should not be out because he killed 3 people and he was on death row. That's not right. It's not right for anybody who's on death row to be free. That is not right at all.
Dan Stoltz worried that shots were going to ring out and his marshals were in the line of fire.
I hate to tell you this, it wasn't going to happen on my watch. The Marshal Service gave me the authority to go out and arrest him. And then they gave me the authority and the responsibility to, once he was arrested and he was in our care, custody, and control, to protect him. So as much as I hated McDuff, and I'm going to tell you I hate him, and I don't hate a lot of people in my life, much as I despise and hate this guy, we had to protect him at the same time.
After the crowds left the federal courthouse in Waco, and I finished my live television news broadcast, Parnell McNamara asked me to come inside to the U.S. Marshal's office. A somber mood filled the room. McNamara's office looked like something you would find in Tombstone in the Old West. He opened his drawer and pulled out Alva Hank Worley's confession. The confession you heard in the previous episode about McDuff's kidnapping and torture of Colleen Reed. McNamara looked me straight in the eye and he sternly told me, "We've done our job. Now you do yours. Find out how this monster got out of prison on parole."
I felt like that the parole board was totally responsible, and the ones that were involved in selling his parole or taking money to turn him loose ought to do a lot of time. I felt like they should be in prison. There was a lot of blood on their hands. It made me sick. We interviewed one of his close relatives who told us that they had a family meeting with one of these parole consultants. And I commend you to this day for exposing this, because we couldn't expose it. We could catch him, run him down, and do all that part. But your constant digging into this nasty thing of parole consultants, where former parole board employees get off the parole board and form a company called Parole Consultants.
Waco's anger subsided. Later that evening, patrons at a local restaurant gave the Marshals Task Force a standing ovation when they walked in for dinner. McDuff sat alone, locked in a cell. Now it was time to find out, as Marshal McNamara said, who had blood on their hands.
And we found out that the parole system, not only were they putting them in the front and letting them out of the back, but the parole board there were some corrupt people on that board, and they were taking money for getting people out. It was just a bad system.
Next on True Crime Reporter, I uncover allegations that McDuff's family paid a $25,000 bribe to get him out of prison.
Aren't you glad it's not a crime to love reality TV? Hey, true crime lovers, this is Shannon, one of the researchers for this podcast. Paper Chaser Paper Goods is your go-to spot for all of your reality TV obsessions. Check out paperchaserpaper.com and channel your love of the Real Housewives with Paper Chaser's reality TV themed gifts. From cocktail napkins to Bravo TV themed invitations, Paper Chaser has everything you need to host happy hour at your place and be the it girl of your inner circle. Now remember, it's not a crime to love reality TV. Paper Chaser believes life's a party, so celebrate something every day. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram for the latest Paper Chaser and reality TV scoop. We'll see you on paperchaserpaper.com.
True Crime Reporter is a trademarked and copyrighted news show. It is an original co-production with Podcast Ad Reps. Hosted and written by me, Robert Riggs. Executive producer Elizabeth Arnold. Audio production by Matt Stoker. Original music by Blair King. Associate producer Siler Burr. Social media producer Grace Woodward. Publicity Tim Livingston, PR. Photography Igor Krgulats. Graphics Brian David Kerr Designs. Special thanks to Gary Laverne, author of Bad Boy from Rosebud, The Murderous Life of Kenneth Allen McDuff. The audio recordings of the Senate Criminal Justice Committee hearings are courtesy of the Texas State Archives. Archive sound bites included in the episodes are from my original Reporter's Notebook tape recordings. And for our listeners who stayed to hear the credits, here's a little bonus.
One thing I did learn from working corruption cases too, like you're talking about, the public outcry. It doesn't matter whether you're Republican or Democrat, or if you mess with the boys club, stand by, because they'll come after you. It doesn't matter. And I experienced that personally.
Pressure to back off.
That's correct. But, you just gotta do what's right.